Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to talk about. I had to come up with a title for this, and we kind of went with TypeScript all the way down. If any of you read any of like the Terry Pratchett Discord books, you have kind of like turtles all the way down. That's kind of where it's from. Um, so that's quite an old photo of me actually, but it's about the best one I have at the moment. So deal with it. So I'm Piers. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Pulumi. We did sponsor one of these last year, I think it was. But yeah, that's me, various ways of contact. So if you don't know what Pulumi is infrastructure as code. The idea is that you can use any language you want within reason to kind of deploy your infrastructure. Pulumi is open source. The idea being that we want to help as many people as possible to kind of manage their infrastructure. There is a commercial aspect to it, but everything I'm going to show you today here, you can do for free. And so, yeah, the idea being that you can deploy to whichever the clouds you want using a language, standard sort of tooling, things like that. So the TypeScript bit comes around. So we've had for a long time this idea of full stack developers, where the traditional kind of pre-cloud apps, when you had just a website and a back end. And the full stack developers were there to they did the front end, they did the back end. There may have been kind of some kind of database there as well. And you either did one or the other. You either were front end or back end or the full stack. And there might have been some kind of infrastructure management stuff in there as well. Maybe you managed a Linux box or a MySQL database, something like that. But as TypeScript has grown, as the cloud has come into play, we've kind of now got this aspect of what I call the full stack plus developer. Because we had Terraform for a long time, and then along came Pulumi, and then CDK and CDKTF. And all these tools now allow you to kind of use the same or similar languages to the ones you're actually using to write code. And I think that's a really important thing, because it means, often when you're working in tech, when you're programming, you talk about being in the zone, in the matrix. You're concentrating on what you're doing, you're writing your code, no one's disturbing you, you've got your headphones on, that kind of thing. And if you are the sort of person that is managing some infrastructure or doing something like that, and you have to switch to either sort of YAML or HCL if you're using Terraform, or CloudFormation for an AWS, and those kind of tools, it kind of takes you out of the zone. You're doing something different. The syntax is different. Even if the code you're writing is something like Rust or Perl or Ruby, you're still kind of taken out of that zone. And by using some of these tools, Pulumi, CDK, CDKTF, it means you can kind of use that same language all the way down. And that's where that idea comes from. It also means that you can integrate your infrastructure as code workflows into your application. So, for example, Pulumi, and I'll show you a quick demo of this later. The idea is you can actually make your infrastructure, part of your application. You can actually make changes based on things that happen. And what that also means, you can then kind of use the same tooling. You've got your IDEs. Use things like Visual Studio Code. Various tools from JetBrains, Visual Studio if you're using the .NET kind of sort of stuff. And there's no point in kind of jumping around. You want the same sort of syntax highlighting. You want the ability to write the same code that you're doing in your normal job, because I'm sure very few people here are like me and actually just do infrastructure all day, every day. You're writing code, you're building applications. Why would you want to break away from that? That's what you do for a job. Let's kind of extend that part of it and allow you to do the infrastructure. You have the same testing frameworks. If you're using TypeScript, use Jest or Mocha, Chai, those kind of frameworks. .NET, you use XUnit. It's all about kind of using the same tooling that you've been using for years. I've been doing this stuff for too long, and as a result of that, there are certain tools that I like. I use VS Code every day. It's the tool I like doing it. But that means that I can use that, and I have all the same syntax management, testing frameworks, package management, and all those same processes. So because you're writing software, which is effectively what you're doing, you can then use that to kind of build out your, the same process you go through when you build your applications. Let's create PRs. Let's let's go through that kind of merge request, that process, and actually make sure our infrastructure is safe and secure because we've got the tests there, because we've got, I don't know, policies being run against the infrastructure we're trying to build, that kind of thing, and actually make it that all the infrastructure we're pushing out and all those changes we're making are safe and secure. And the thing is, like, the time to ramp up is really important. Like, just had a question here. How many people, and this is probably going to be really, really bad, how many people do some sort of infrastructure as code as part of their job? You do CDK, you do Terraform. No one's going to put their hand up, are they? Anyone? Oh, okay, that's cool. So you at least know about these sort of tools. And out of those people, how many are, that is not their day job? Their normal day job is building applications. They write software for a living. Yeah? Yeah. So presumably, and I'm going to guess that a majority of you also use Terraform or HCL, something like that. And so when you started building applications, you're doing one language, probably JavaScript or TypeScript because you're here. And then you've got to sort of learn the HCL part of it as well. Well, what's the point in learning a whole new thing when you can just use CDK, use Pulumi? You already know these languages. There's not much point in kind of learning these new things, new way of doing things. And the same thing kind of goes for things like community and jobs out there. How many TypeScript developers do we think there are in the world? There's millions. I bet there's not as many people that know things like HCL, things like CloudFormation, all those kind of things. I bet the number's far fewer. So why not kind of look at building out your CV and that kind of thing, because you're still using those same languages. There's no point hiring someone who knows HCL when you can hire someone that knows TypeScript, because that's the application they do. That's the language they write the applications in. Let's make that the language they write their infrastructure in. Infrastructure library. So Pulumi, we have component resources. CDK, you have constructs. If you've not used either of those but know Terraform, it's a Terraform module. The idea being that you can build out infrastructure libraries, you can build out NPM packages, NuGet packages, all those kind of things, put them into whatever artifactory type thing that you use as a day-to-day, and you can actually start building out SDKs and as I say, these infrastructure libraries based on the code you're using. And it means you can have these shareable libraries. So you've done someone has done the work to actually create these libraries. And then you can share them and make it easier for people to kind of build and deploy their applications more easily. And then you have this idea of embedding your infrastructure. This is more of a Pulumi-related thing, where you can actually embed your infrastructure and the changes to your infrastructure into your applications. So you end up with infrastructure as code tooling that reacts to external events. So for example, you could have like a REST API that receives requests, or some like sort of pub sub queuing system that receives events, and then you can trigger changes to your infrastructure based on those events. So let's say let's say you sell web servers. You sell web servers, and someone puts a credit card in. Credit card is all good, and then that fires off an event, and because of that event, you can then start creating all the web servers they need to run their application. And it's all integrated, and it's all automated, and because it's automated, it's relatively safe. And so, yeah, you kind of get these things that, as I say, react to external events. I have no idea what time I started. Cool, okay, so I'm going to show you what this looks like. This is Pulumi. As I say, you can do all this stuff for free. I'm using air quotes here, mono repo, because it's nothing like what the next talk is about, but everything's in one repo, so yeah. So this is kind of, has anyone used Pulumi? I know there was one guy here before who has. Nice, love it. Okay, that's more than I expected, so that's good. we're still a startup and so forth. So this is what Pulumi looks like. Obviously, this is TypeScript. And the idea here is that you can, you're defining your resources. Everything is dependent on each other. You're using, what is more kind of Node than that? Grabbing something from the file system, and actually kind of building out these resources. And it's fast as well, because you're kind of not using, although there is like state and stuff like that, it's TypeScript, it's fast. And you can kind of set up, you can have all these programs working together. So I've got this. I'm going to quickly run this. No, that's not right. Where is it? Backend. I can't spell, I'm sorry. Okay, so that's coming up. So I've got my application already set up. This is going to allow me to deploy a database. So this is my backend. There's nothing, there's nothing unusual about this. I'm deploying a Hono app because we're a Cloudflare. If anyone hasn't tried Hono, it's really, really fast, and I really, really like it. I don't work for Cloudflare, obviously. But I really like it. Although I do not like Wrangler. If anyone, if anyone, I heard some giggles. If anyone kind of has used this, just let me do stuff in infrastructure as code. Don't make me run other tools. I've just spun up, in the time it's taken me to talk, I've spun up a database, and various things for this to run. So that's fast. I could combine all these things together. I can actually turn this into a TypeScript class, and then I could put that in an npm package and go have some nice defaults and go, here we go. Now you can all deploy a worker script, a Cloudflare worker, pass in the path of your app, and that'll allow you to do it. And so you don't have to come up with anything extra. On top of that, you can just deploy it. And as I say, it's all very simple. It's all very nice. Front end is exactly the same, except for this is Cloudflare pages, so it's all Git based. But again, and the nice thing about this is you can actually run code as part of your updates. So because I've already got my code in a repo, if I create a pages project using Pulumi, it will create the pages project, but it won't trigger a first deployment, because usually if you go through the workflow, you select your GitHub repo and it starts deploying straight away, but it doesn't do that if you use the APIs. However, because you're using Pulumi, and this is one of the nice things about it, you'll notice here I'm actually making web requests as part of my update. So if I run Pulumi up here, which is how I deploy stuff, once these things are there, so I've got my pages project name, my pages domain ID, which means that those resources have been created, it's then going to run this API call. And so that allows me to kind of build out, to actually start integrating with the Cloudflare API, even if there's not a specific resource to do the thing I want to do, I can start kind of playing around with actually make API calls as part of my update, which allows me to kind of expand on what's already there. So I'm going to run that. What's that? Front end info. And that's going to run, and that's just going to run. No, it's not, because I can't even spell the place I work for. Yeah, so that's going to run now, and that's going to start, and that's going to deploy very quickly. And it's going to, because I've got that API call in there, that's just going to, once these other resources have been deployed, that's then going to go and run this API call. And we'll see that in a second. The other thing that you might notice is, and this is a nice thing, so I've got my Cloudflare token and I've got my Cloudflare account ID. So I've actually also got a third project here called Setup, which I have before. Now, I'm going to show you now all my Cloudflare details. And you can take photos of the screen, I don't care, because it's all encrypted, so good luck with that. So if you've used Terraform and you have secrets in Terraform, they're not secret. Rule number 1 of using Terraform State, any secrets in there, they're not encrypted. As you can see, we encrypt stuff. So that means that I can now share that with other projects in my infrastructure, and it will decrypt and encrypt and do everything magic it needs to do to be able to do that. And as you can see, while I've been talking, the rest has been deployed. So if I go to here, where are we? Yeah. So you can see I've got the back end. I've got my data store, which doesn't have any tables because I haven't run the migration script yet, because Wrangler. And I got my Cloudflare pages, and you can see here I've kicked off the first. It's already been deployed, and that's all through that API call. It means that I can do extra steps around. So another example is, I've got some extra configuration in some database somewhere. It might be another D1 database. I don't know. I can go off and make calls to that and actually grab config from those data stores and actually use that configuration as part of my setup, all because I am using an actual programming language and I'm not, with CDK, CDKTF, you're not running the actual TypeScript that you write. You're running the kind of the transpiled. CDK goes to CloudFormation, CDKTF goes to JSON that is the compiled version of HCL. And so you can't do, there's a lot of things like this you can't do. I'm sorry, this is starting to be a bit salesy. I'm listening to myself. But, it is a matter of fact. There are things you can do with Pulumi you can't do with other tooling. Yeah, and so, I've got this now. Has it actually set up my thing? It says this works. So there we go. So that's what I've deployed. If you want to go to that URL, you can. It's not gonna break anything. But yeah, so that's kind of and that's all been done with TypeScript. There's been no kind of other languages. I've not compiled anything to other languages. It's pure TypeScript, pure code, and it means that I'm not a TypeScript developer. I'm not a Node developer by default. My background is .NET, so I'm not going to show you the actual code for this site because that would just be embarrassing. But if I can, as someone who uses .NET, who uses TypeScript, this makes it easier to kind of manage your infrastructure because you're using languages. Even if you're not using Pulumi, even if you're using CDK or CDKTF, it's worth investigating those because it means that you don't have to break out of the zone. You don't have to context switch. All those kind of buzzwords that you hear when people talk about how developers can really focus. You don't have to kind of change that because you're writing in whatever language your application writes in. Yeah, that's me done. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll be hovering around later. It will be. Please don't judge me on the code because it's not nice. Yeah. Sorry, the GitHub name is my name, so it's the same as.
This isn't exactly a question, but I just wanted to ask about your opinion on like SST Ion because I know they're using Pulumi as well. So just wanted to know your thoughts on it.
I love it. Like we've been working closely with those guys. Dax and
Jay.
Yes, that's the one. So they've been part of our. We've been working with. They're in our Slack workspace. We've been working with them, and it's great. And I am biased. I've been working at Pulumi for the last 3.5 years. Been using Pulumi for about 4.5 years. I'm biased. I wouldn't work for Pulumi. I work in sales, literally. I wouldn't be able to sell something that I'm not passionate about, like as I am as passionate about Pulumi. And I love that they're using Pulumi, and it shows how extendable it is because the code they've written is all in Go. All the stuff they've written is in Go, but if you go and look at SST, none of it is in Go. It's all TypeScript. And that shows the extensibility, the power of Pulumi, that you can actually do that and you can kind of work with the different languages and things like that. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be great for us because even if you're still using open source version, it's getting the name of Pulumi out. HashiCorp have a long, they have years ahead of us. And so, it is the case that I think it's great. I think it's a great tool. I think that it's going to do, if it helps people learn about Pulumi and if it helps people build better infrastructure and better, safer infrastructure, that's all good as well.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thanks, Piers. Great talk. What's the local dev story like with Pulumi and workers? Because I know Wrangler's got a great local dev mode, but how?
So I would say that because Pulumi is not really the thing you're running, the idea of Pulumi is that you end up with something in a remote place. You can run, as I mentioned earlier, there are ways of embedding Pulumi into your application, and obviously that is an application you're running on a local machine. So that is just a Node app or whatever. But because the thing you're talking to is remote, there isn't really a local story. Things, like SST is going to do wonders for things like running and testing lambdas more easily and things like that. At the end of the day, they're still using Pulumi, they're still using Amazon, so there's still going to be that kind of latency, that feedback loop is still going to be a bit slower. But I would say there isn't really one because it's not. You can test what you're doing in Pulumi, so you can run unit tests against it. You can also run, we have this thing, policy as code, which means you can actually build out policies using OPA or TypeScript or Python to actually almost test what you're doing and make sure what you're doing is actually safe and secure. So don't open port whatever to the internet, that kind of thing. So there is a local testing story, but there isn't a local running story because you're not running Amazon from your laptop. You can use it with a local stack, but you're not running AWS from your laptop, so you wouldn't be testing against your laptop.
Thank you.
Oh.
I can shout.
Okay, so quick question on Pulumi. So what's free and what do you have to pay for?
That's an excellent question. Okay, so as I said, so Pulumi is open source. The CLI is open source. So there's kind of three parts to it. So you have the CLI, you have the providers, which are the bits that, so like Terraform has providers, we have providers, use them to talk to whatever cloud service you're using. And then the state storage. So you can store your state in S3, an S3 bucket, in Azure Blob containers, on your local laptop, and you never have to pay us a penny. There is also a commercial SaaS product where you can do state storage and do control who has access to what deployments and things like that. That's the paid for product. The rest is the CLI, the providers. That's all open source and free, and yeah.
Cool. I think we're going to call time on it. If there's more you want to talk to Piers about, we'll be having a break for about 10 minutes in a minute. So yeah, thanks, Piers. Good to give him another.